Okay, it's not. It's not Slater. I saw what she was using. I don't think it's that. I think it's something else. Okay, Slater wouldn't be useful because it's not from a book. Right. Don't ask me how I know. Okay, so Unit 4. Okay, completing the square, Part 2. So get your notes out. No. Photomath never worked for me. Good, they must have improved it. Anyway. Am I going to catch you using it? No, probably not. But you also need to know how to do it on the test. So if you can use until you can use Photomath on the test, you should probably know how to do it. Okay. Once again, you pass Algebra 1 with Photomath, and Algebra 2 is all stuff from Algebra 2, or Algebra 1, basically. That might be the indicator. I'm just saying. There's a reason we ask you not to use it, because we know you're going to see it again in Algebra 2. Okay, so let's look at this. So, listen up. Second part of completing the square is we are going to solve each equation. So now we are going to take what we did in part 1 and actually use it to solve a quadratic equation. It is going to get harder. But that's why we kind of split it into 2 parts. So hopefully you have the first part done well. So solve each equation. These are going to be quadratic equations. How many answers will I usually get with a quadratic equation? 2. So as I look at these, let's look at an example and I'll go through with the steps for you. So let's look at this example. X squared plus 8x minus 48 equals 0. So to solve by completing the square, a couple of things you need to notice. I'll put asterisk up here. Must have 1 in front of x squared. So one thing you have to have in order to complete the square is you need to have a 1 in front of your x squared part, or m squared or y squared or whatever. Okay, so that's one thing you have to do completing the square. Yes, sir?
Can you just do the thing where you put like XX on there?
Well, we can try that. That's the first thing I would try. If you can try that, you can always try to factor this. Okay, this one will factor. However, your directions on your homework will say solve by completing the square. Tomorrow, when all the directions say is solve and you get to choose between any method, if you're given a problem like this, factoring would probably be easier. But we're going to for today's homework, practice doing it by completing the square. When I give it to you all together and you get to choose which way you want to, then I would factor this. But for today's purpose, we are going to use completing the square. So first step. Step 1. Move constant to the right side. Okay, so you have to get it set up to do completing the square. So the square root method, I got x squared equal to a number. Factoring, I got it equal to 0. Now the completing the square method, I have to move the constant to the right side. So now it could be any side technically, but for what we're going to do, we'll usually just use the right side. So if I look at this problem, this is the problem I have, how would I move the constant over to the right side? Add 48. So just like with square root factoring, you kind of have to set it up a special way. For completing the square, we are going to add 48. Now you're going to want to leave a little blank after the 8x. So when you rewrite it, you're going to want to put x squared plus 8x plus a little blank equals 48. Now that little blank is going to be like we did on the first part, where you have to find what number goes after the 8x. Just like you had to find what number went in the blank, you have to do the same thing. So step 2, we are going to take I'm going to write this, middle term divided by 2, this is what we did in part 1, so I'm not going to write it all out. Middle term divided by 2, and then squared. Okay, I'm not going to write it all out because it's like what we did in part 1 on the page before it. So we're going to take my middle term. What's the middle term?
4.
Middle term. 8 divided by 2. So you just did it in your head. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 squared. 16. You are going to take 16 and add to both sides. This is like we did on the page right before this, the same process. Middle term, divide by 2, and then square it. So when you write it, that's the number that goes after the 8x. Plus 16. Now we have an equation, so I have to keep both sides equal. So if I add 16 on the left side, I have to add 16 on the right side. So what's 48 plus 16? 64. So the only thing different from one, so I have to add
16 to both sides. Any questions? The last step. The point of completing the square is always to write it as a what? We did it on the part 1.
Square.
So yes, something squared. So the left side, we are going to write as x something squared, like we did on the part 1. That's the point of completing this square. So if I look on the left side, we are going to write the left side as x plus something or x minus something squared. So my left side will be x what squared? How do I find what number goes with the x? It's 4. It's what you get after you divide by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. That's going to be x plus 4 squared. And the right side stays the same. So that's where part 1 comes into play. On the left side, you write it as x, the middle term, divided by 2, 4 squared. Is this solved?
Yes.
Is this solved?
No.
No, because it's not solved because it's not x equals a number. So the next step, you are going to, let's think about this, common sense. I cannot solve for x until I take care of the square on the outside. How do I cancel out a square?
Square root.
Square root both sides. So the next step is to square root both sides. We're going to do a few more examples like this. So square root both sides. Okay. If I square root something squared, what's my answer? What happens when I square root something squared? It stays the same. Cancel, so you just have x plus 4. The exponent cancels with the square root, so you just have x plus 4. What's the square root of 64? What's the square root of 64?
8.
Square root of 64 plus or minus 8, like we talked about last week. So don't forget plus or minus. And then how do I solve for x?
Subtract 4 from both sides.
Subtract 4. So x equals positive 8 minus 4, and x equals negative 8 minus 4, because it's plus or minus 8. 8 minus 4? 4. Negative 8 minus 4? Negative 12. So those are my two answers. So, we're completing the square, what we did in part 1, and we're combining it with the square root method, where you square root and put plus or minus. I know these takes a little bit of steps, so that's why I'm going to do a couple more examples. And it give you a ton on the homework to do. Nice. Okay. Questions on that? Specific questions? Okay, let's look at another example. I'm not going to write down all the steps for this one. We'll just work through it. Okay, so here's another quadratic equation. Now tomorrow, like I said, you will be able to choose whichever way you want to do. So if I look at this one, you could not do the square root method because of the 18n. You wouldn't be able to factor it. You would try, but you wouldn't be able to. So we're going to do the completing the square method. First thing I need to do do completing the square method, step one is I need to do what? Move the 27 over. You have to get the constant to the right side. So n squared minus 18n, leave a blank, equals 27. Step two. Do what? What'd you say? Okay, middle term divided by 2 will give me what?
9.
So you can do it to the side if you want to. Negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9. Negative 9 squared?
81.
81. What do I do with that 81? Plus 81, plus 81. I know it's kind of some steps, and it's kind of a lot of steps, but you guys can do it. You kind of have to think about the steps. So add 81 to the left side, add 81 to the right side, because it's an equation, so left and right side have to stay equal. Do what? Okay, so let's just start with the left side. N squared minus 18n plus 81. The point of completing the square is to write it as something squared. So this is the left side will become
9.
Yep. Yep. And then 27 plus 81, what do you say, Nate? 108. Okay. So the left side is always the n, and then the number you got after you divide by 2 squared equals 108. Yeah, you're good, decimal.
Okay.
Now, I need to solve for n, so I need to get rid of the exponent of a 2. So how do I get rid of the 2?
Square root.
Square root both sides. You may get a decimal on some of these, which is okay. The left side will look like what?
The same.
N minus 9. The right side, what is the square root of 108?
Plus or minus
Just round to 3 decimal places. Plus or minus 10.392.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ashley, do you want to go? Okay, let me finish this real quick and I'll send you. Okay, and then I need to solve for n. How do I solve for n? Add 9. So on your calculator, we're going to have two answers. 10.392 plus 9. So a positive 10.392 plus 9. And a negative 10.392 plus 9. So just, even though it looks weird because of the decimal, just plug in your calculator. 10.392 plus 9. 19.392 is one answer. And negative 10.392 plus 9.
1.392.
Negative 1.392. And those are my two answers. So you may get a decimal. Just plug in your calculator. Okay. Do you want me to do one more with you? Oh, you guys love to hear me talk. Thank you for that positive reinforcement.
Trying to get our work done.
No, you're fine. I get it. You're good. Here you go, Ashley. Yeah, I'm going to cry in the corner over here. Okay, so go ahead and you can do 16 through 27, so 14 problems. There you go. No.